Thank you for coming and for joining us for this final presentation of the 2025 speaker series. My name's Heidi Nastasi, and I have the privilege of serving on the Cupola House Association board. And tonight I will be introducing our speakers for a look at the surprises and the discoveries made during the de-installation of the Cupola House woodwork in preparation for the reinstallation of the woodwork, the original woodwork that has come to us from Brooklyn. Our speakers tonight are Andrew Owenby Restoration, and Wade Rogers. I'm sure they don't need any introduction for this audience. They've been involved in just about all of the major restoration projects in Edenton, currently underway, and Wade's even restoring a house here for he and his family. Before we begin, however, I would like to note that Vonna O'Neill is in the house this evening. She's been away from Edenton for several weeks, and we are really happy to have her back. Vonna, would you like to say a few things?
Thank you, Heidi, and I want to thank Heidi and Elizabeth Corker for putting together our speaker series. It's been a very popular program. As you can see, this is standing room only. I thought that we would be at capacity this evening, and rightly so. What you're going to see this evening is just the tip of the iceberg. This is the beginning of the next story as part of our journey. But along with this, Heidi is in charge of putting together our documentary. There's never been a documentary on the Cupola House and our history, and we felt it was time. And this is a rich time for us to capture what's been going on leading up to this, as well as today. And the filming for that will continue the rest of this year and part of next year until we get everything back in place. So it's a continuing saga of this great journey that we're on, and I'm thrilled to have our subject matter experts here, Andrew and Wade, and Donna's missing this evening, but certainly look forward to this evening and much more of this. Thank you.
I'd just like to remind everybody that we are filming this, and the film goes on our YouTube channel, so please silence your phones before we begin. Andrew, Wade, take it away.
Well, thank you all for coming out tonight and spending the evening with us. We're going to be digging a little deeper than the last time. We were discussing the move for all the people who were here, the woodwork coming back, and so over the course of the last 3.5 months, just over 3 months, we have had the chance to remove the replicated 1960s woodwork. And in doing so, we did exactly what we told you and warned you we were going to do. We uncovered a lot of questions. Along the way, we have found some answers, though, and there's plenty more to come. So tonight, the focus is going to be a little bit of primary source research we've had to do to understand what we're seeing, which is all mainly focused in the 20th century documentation coming from a few different sources, which is really interesting. And then the number one primary source of research for the Cupola House is the Cupola House. So itself, it speaks to us. I know that sounds cheesy, but we're going to talk about what it's telling us. So tonight, there's no suggestions about what we're doing moving forward. This is simply observations and focused on, well, mainly opening Corbin's doors. About 3 months ago, when we first began the process of the installation, the Cupola Association's idea of having this speaker series was brought up again, and Miss Louise asked me what we should do, and we talked about mysteries. You came up with this idea about mysteries because it was kind of the thing. So we're running with that theme, but along the way things have changed. So here we go with the mysteries of the opening Corbin's doors. I want to start with a really interesting guy. His name's not James Corbin. His name is Mac Lloyd Chappell. Mac Lloyd Chappell, born in Edenton, attended Edenton Academy. He wrote his senior thesis on the Cupola House in and that was published in 1916. He was trying to win an award. He didn't quite win, but he should have. He won an award in our books because he becomes the most important source of information for us in the 20th century in the Cupola House. His thesis is essentially a walking tour of the house 3 years, some three and a half years before the Brooklyn Museum comes in to purchase this interior, with a whole different motive for being in the house. Mr. Matt Chappell was a senior in high school. Again, he ends up going, he attends the University of North Carolina. He's then drafted into the Army, serves in World War I, stationed in France. After that, he becomes a professional meteorologist in Charleston, and then up in Norfolk, Virginia, where he dies in 1957, and he is buried back in Eatonton. He was born in the little town of Chapel Hill, Chowan County, up on County Line Road somewhere there. The chapel name might give that away a little bit. Somebody in this room very well may be kin to him. He still has kin in the area, we believe. So there's a whole nother lecture series and discussion that will unveil, hopefully, this whole document. That it is incredible. We're going to talk about effectively 2 pages of this document. But when I say it's a walking tour, he starts outside the house, he goes in, and he ends up on the 3rd floor. He talks about everything from windows to trim, to molding profiles, to sizes of timbers, to furnishings. It's absolutely a gold mine of information with no bias. He simply is observing and writing down what he sees. He doesn't say it's old or new. It's absolutely fantastic. So Mr. Matt Lloyd Chappell has become a very important person in our world over the last 3 months. And so he sort of spearheads what we're doing. This is the cover page of his article. It's Matt Chappell, the Cupola House and its Associations. The first page we want to talk about for a minute. The highlighted portions obviously are the focus. What we're looking at here is the very first indication that we got of something that we're going to unveil to you tonight, that we found primary source information for, both from this writing, a couple of notes in the Brooklyn files, and then physical evidence that we were able to find along the way. He mentions we're on about the 3rd or 4th page, and he says the rear room to the left. So we're going through the house, we've been in the dining room, we come back out in the hall, and he describes a couple of rooms, and he goes on. The rear room on the left was used as a bedroom. Rear room on the left. Everybody been in the Cupola House? Anybody not been in the Cupola House? Okay, we walked in the front door and we went to the back of the hall, the rear room on the left. We call that room 103 in our documentation. The rear room on the left was a bedroom. It is the only room in the house, it's 1915, the only room the house that had curtains over the door. Actually, a little note goes off your mind. What does he mean by that? And then he says it's 11 foot wide. He goes on, he talks about the width, some of the moldings, the crown, and then the next thing highlighted, there are 2 windows and 2 6-panel doors, one of them opening into the drawing room. If none of you have been in the Cupola House in the last 3 months, that is not the room you saw. You saw one room with one door and another room with one door. There were no door connecting the two. There's no passage between the 2 west rooms, which would be the parlor in the back. In the last years, it's been depicted as Dickinson's office and that kind of thing. So with Don Jordan out here, I will say, he looked at me, he said, I remember walking through that door. When it was a library, there was a door, and there's people in this room who probably remember that door. So we knew there was a doorway. He says there's a door in 1915. There was a doorway in the memory of folks who've been here. And so as we move on in our documentation, we just sort of make a note, okay, there's a door. This was a discussion before we ever went to New York. When we got to Brooklyn, there's no door. There's no evidence of a door, maybe a little bit. And so we moved on. What you're looking at on the left is a 1930s Habs drawing. This red circle is that door that Mac Chappell describes. So it's there in the 30s. A little brief sort of breakdown of the timeline. 1918, the woodwork leaves. By 1920, in the minutes, the Cupola Association has restored this interior of this building to become a library, and they say less of complicated woodwork. Well, apparently that door was still there by the late 30s when the Habs survey was done. This would have been 38, 39, 37, somewhere in that range, right, Robert? That door is depicted. But by the 1960s, it goes away. So if you look over here to the right, this is really bad, and I apologize, but it was impossible. This red arrow, there's a wall. This is that fireplace. And this is that door. This is 1918. This is a drawing from the Brooklyn files in their sketches when they moved that woodwork. So there's the door and there's the door. Mac has described it. And now we get into photography. 12 photographs. We have 12 negatives from 1918. They're immensely important. We take pictures at nauseum today. It's just crazy how many pictures we take. They bragged about getting these 12 photographs. I think I mentioned that last lecture. This photograph, though, is a bit grainy because this is a photograph that we were not able to find the original first version of, copy of. This is a Xerox copy from 1980. So this existed. This is an in situ photograph from the Brooklyn Museum. And if you look, these rectangles are actually part of the Ralph, what do they call their the black and white? They have grid on them for scale, I guess. Is that, I don't know. Anyway, should ask you that before, but anyhow, this is really bad photograph, but there are numbers on the staircase. This is as they're dismantling things and they get ready to move out. So here's a doorway. Remember the note about curtains on the door? Well, we start looking at this photograph and we zoom in, and this is a little bit of clearer version. See these round knobs right here? These are curtain tiebacks. The only room with curtains on the door. 3 years before this photograph, those are still there. But look through, I'm going to back up to that previous photograph. Look through this doorway and what do you see? You know, this is focused on the staircase. Well, we know the staircase is there. We kind of lose interest at that point, right? For a little while. We look through there, and this is what we see. Right there is a panel, and this is a jacket probably hanging on that door. The red arrow is a panel. This is a raised panel door. Looking through that doorway. We saw this photograph before we really started piecing everything together. It was an aha moment. Okay, there's the first photograph of this doorway in situ. This was here when it left. Backing up, just this morning, I think I was rereading Matt Chappell's write-up, just preparing for this, and he notes there are 2 6-panel doors in that room. Well, we'll talk a minute briefly about some changes. It gets busy, but nonetheless, this photograph is immensely important, probably more important for the study and the understanding of what was there that left than any other photograph in the house. The other photographs that show things that were not altered. So, for some reason, we don't really know why, but for some reason, this door was omitted in Brooklyn. Then in 1966 or 65 or 4, they went to Brooklyn, copied what they saw, came back to Edenton, and omitted the door. It's just that simple. It's been the question. I remember Tom Newbern asked me, Don Jordan asked me about the door. We looked at the wear on the floor. You can see it. All the indications are there. And then, if you go, this is what you'll see today as you go in. So we've removed the woodwork from this is the parlor. This is room 103, that's 105 back there. The green mantle in the background you can see through. And this doorway is mortise and pinned into this header and indicates an original opening that had to be framed together. It's pinned in the bottom, pinned in the top. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that when we were pulling the woodwork out of Brooklyn, we actually questioned this door location first because the molding profiles around that door were the later federal style that goes with the more federal elements of the house. But I kind of always had the hunch of the door that Don Jordan talked about as a kid going through and talking to Tom. So we had wondered if they had switched the door locations.
We still are not.
There's still some
we're
questions.
not dead sure, but we have some indication. There is, and we're not 100% on the moldings, but there are a set of moldings that came off of one of these doors out of Brooklyn. We know where they came from in Brooklyn, but what we don't know is if they got mixed in translation. It happens. Trust me, if you don't label stuff correctly. And they moved this out really quickly. And so we have to wonder. We found screw hole locations that are where these are on some door trim that wasn't at that location. So that's the investigative sort of nature of things. This is where Susan Buck, who I don't know who was able to come to her lecture, but it's absolutely, it's hard to describe just how important paint analysis is for this project. So paint analysis allows us to compare and contrast the stratigraphy on this door. Just so happens that the door, well, I might be getting ahead of myself. There's what you see, and this is what First Peter. Wayne, do you want to talk about? We're going to transition. We're still indoors. This kind of all runs together. I thought we were going to do two separate topics, two separate rooms, two separate topics.
It smashes together.
They run into each other. They really they collide.
As of like 2 weeks ago.
Like 2 weeks ago, it all ran together. It's not cut and dry. I'll read this and I'm handing it over away from it because he found this and can really speak to it really well. But we did know about Mac, so we're back to Mac Chapel. He's gonna be our segue into a little bit different place. But dealing with doors that are been shuffled around, and again, on each side of the back of the room, there's a small opening to a separate butler's pantry. The room he's standing in, if you read the page before, is the dining room. Here is his sketch of the dining room cupboard. So we can go and see here, these doors, he's describing these doors. Mac Chapel says on each side of the back of the room, there's a small door opening into a separate butler's pantry. Does he mean a separate butler's pantry? Or does he mean a separate butler's pantries? Well, that's a question, right? We knew, okay, there's two doors. Why would there be, if you were to go in there and remove the modern kitchen, you would stand in a room with 3 doorways in this very small area. Makes you wonder, right? Why and 2 doors sort of run into each other? They just don't make sense. Typically in early houses, you eventually get back to what makes sense. It just kind of worked that way. We end up kind of making things complicated. But so there's a first indication of a separate butler's pantry. This became really important early on. And as we started the process and we're going around those sets of rooms, we end up, and I thought my next slide was what I was going to hand to you, but it keeps going, sorry. The rear room to the right. So here again, trying to lead you out. So 2 pages later, Mac Chapel has left the dining room. He's gone down the hall. He's already talked about the 2 rooms to the left, and he turns to the right, which is what would be the kitchen that we are familiar with in the Cupola House, that back room. And he says the rear room to the right of the hall, in the lower floor, was merely used as a butler's pantry. Well, he just mentioned 2 pages ago, 2 doors with a butler's pantry. It has several rows of shelves, and here may be seen the back of the china cabinet, or china closet. That's that barrel back cupboard. You've been able to see the reproduction for years. The original was just like that. In Brooklyn, these are the papers from Brooklyn. And they're really hard to see again, but I'll try to point it out. This is the cupboard, 2 doors. If you were to blow this up on a computer screen or on your phone, you could actually see there's no partition wall, it's just one big room. Well, he says, china closet, 2 doors into a china closet, right? To a separate china closet. But does he mean separate china closets or one separate from this room? What does he mean? These are the notes that we have. There's a lot of notes, a lot of just notation of widths and depths of room. These are from 1918. These are preliminary notes. It says Edenton at the top. It's dated. Down here at the bottom, it says pantry depth 96.5, width 193.5. Down the last line, this is why you read all the way to the bottom, divided on street side 71 inches. That is the only notation from Brooklyn that indicates any type of partition in that room. So then you go back to Mac Chapel and you say, what do you mean, Mac, by separated? Do you mean 2 or 1 butler pantries?
So the only field evidence that we could then have was when Clifford,
I wish I'd have entered
we
with that
could not
picture.
wait, or Chief Clifford could not wait. We were in the Brooklyn Museum, and the back of this cupboard had sheet board, or it's
Yeah, it was like a plot.
1950s board. Clifford couldn't help herself, tears it off to see what's behind, and there we see this vertical ghost mark for the partition wall that Mac Chapel is talking about.
So in that, what Wade's discussing is Clifford pulled all of what was off to your right. You can barely see, this is the dome part of the cupboard. This is protruding into the room. This is what Mac Chapel not exactly what Matt Chappell saw when he looked through the door, but you can kind of get an idea. It's got shelves. This is Brooklyn Museum's reinterpretation of it. But that partition wall is not there. They said it was there when they left Edenton, 71 inches from the street side. So we have what Wade just described as a ghost mark on the back of the cupboard. The yellow line indicates what Clifford unveiled as she was pulling that stuff off. We saw this line in Brooklyn. We did not know about the note. We had not found that 71-inch division note. And we didn't really understand what Mac Chappell was talking. But as Wade said, we have stood at nauseam and stared at this line. Same way we attest to the time probably spent. He thinks we stared at a brick wall. Well, you ought to watch us stare at a ghost mark. Even when it's on a brick wall, it's even better. This line clearly indicates a division, and it's oddly positioned. It doesn't make sense to us, but it was a clear indication of something to be looking for. So we brought this back, and then we start looking. And as we're digging, we've got a mental note: look for partition, look for partition. But that's all we had to indicate that there was this partition, and then we go back. And one day we dig and find this 71-inch from the street side division wall. Okay, how does that play into this? So if you measure from this to the wall, you get these kind of, you're close, you're in the 74, 75-inch range, you don't really know, but that's been heavily altered. Wade, do you want to describe what happened when you pulled this off the other day when I wasn't there?
Yeah. So I was doing the final tear out in the of all the sheetrock and later trim in the kitchen area, and started seeing all the evidence that we were seeing on the cupboard replicated above. So that yellow arrow with that square mortise, we think that's where a horizontal member was that this partition wall was then attached to.
Yeah, right there, that's where.
And, you know, we're not sure if the reproduction cupboard is in its exact location, but when we get the original cupboard in there, we're gonna know exactly where that needs to go based on the mortise above and the ghost line below, and possible evidence on the floor.
One of the reasons why we were looking for this, it kind of snowballs at the point where we find this and we start taking out the interior. And this was actually the last room that we dismantled about 2 weeks ago. We just found that, what, a week and a half ago?
Yeah, last week.
We knew there was a partition wall there. Based off of this, based off Mac Chappell's note, and then that Brooklyn note of 71 inches street side. This edge of that mortise, which went into a deep, sort of thick cornice piece, is 71 inches from the header on the other side. So,
and we've been looking for that with bore scopes, with 1/4-inch holes
We've
drilled,
done.
cocking your head side to side, trying to figure out where in the world you are.
it was hidden.
And we
Right.
finally found that.
The first physical evidence beyond the corner cupboard that we found of partition wall, Don Jordan, we had pulled the woodwork out of, we're back, this is that green room, that back room on the west side, back in 103. We had gone in and the corner posts protrude into the room, but they were reinterpreted and sort of shimmed out to mimic that in the 1960s woodwork, and we didn't really understand why the corner posts were replaced. That was understandable. But the two shims were two 3/4 boards, maybe 6 inches wide, nailed together and then nailed to the wall. And they had an interesting surface, old surface. This is why you don't just rip into the stuff. We pulled that thing down, and I remember Don just yelling. It's like, he was excited. As excited as Don Jordan gets. He was pretty excited. I know what gets him now. These actually came out another one, but this is the second pair, but anyway, for the sake of discussion, it would look just like this. They were mated together, and we took them apart, and we laid them out, and sure enough, they're whitewashed, and they're gray washed on both sides, and there's evidences of shells. It's just lines. We knew exactly what we were looking at. It is partition wall parts. They had been split up into smaller segments, but they are partition wall parts. If you were to measure up here, these notches, there's a ghost mark up there where the whitewash ends, and then down at the bottom, if you were to measure that, you will land yourself right there from the floor. They are the same width as this line. So when Susan Buck was here, we said, "Hey, Susan, How about pull some paint analysis and tell us what you see? Take samples of this, of that, and of these, and compare and contrast. Let's see what we get. It's the exact same surface, strictly. So, it gets even better. We got excited, and then Don was there to get excited again, because we pull the next corner post out, and here's more. There's more segments, and there's a mortise right here. This is really hard to describe unless you're in person, but you'll see it again one day. This section that I'm highlighting here is right here on this partition wall board, and Wade spotted that. He's like, this thing has a door. So this is the horizontal header of the door. It's still got its pins and its mortise. So all of a sudden now, we do not have any reference to a door in the partition wall, but we have some strong physical evidence that does that. And Wade and I was talking about it, when he was like, well, I wish we had another partition wall compared to.
It's just like, let's
It's
open
like,
another corner.
okay, well, let's go upstairs and look at the partition wall that's upstairs on the 3rd floor, because there's one up there. And so we go upstairs, and sure enough, that's exactly how the cupboard, the barrel back sort of cupboard type thing, that is the staircase around that goes up, the barrel, if you will, its door, its moldings, it lines right up with what you see here material wise. Same bead size, same door mortise type, it's spot on. Same guy, same approach, all this stuff. So it all starts to make sense. Now this is where I was thinking I was gonna get earlier. Wade, talk about that door.
So last week, I was taking the trim off of this. This is the back door. You're in the hall on that right door going into y'all's kitchen. And I was not expecting, cause this is the one door I had not questioned. I just assumed it had the old profile moldings on it in the reconstruction and in Brooklyn. But however, when I took all the reproduction woodwork off, took the casing out, I looked up and I said, that's not an original door opening at all. That's been hacked up, it's not mortise intended correctly. It seems like what they've done is,
I got some.
maybe in the 20th century, or, well, we're still jury's out, 20th or early 19th century.
I didn't have this line.
They had opened the doorway to make that a bedroom or some kind of access to that pantry space. But originally, as Corbin had it built, that was not a door location at all. So during this whole time when we're looking at across the hall in the doctor's office, we said, well, we gotta put this door back, but now we have to make a door.
We've literally stood in that door and looked at the other door, that view across the stair, and looked at that other door and said, when are we gonna build a door? While we
We're
stood
gonna
in
have
this
to build a
door.
But that door was in that door's location.
We were leaning against the door that came out.
So what they have done is they had taken the door that separated the two, the parlor and that back office space. And because it matched all the doors in the hall, instead of making a new door that didn't match, they just took the old door, put it in the hall. All the doors are the same, and I guess they made a new door, which we don't have that door. Brooklyn took it,
We
whatever
don't-
they did with it.
There's a little question there, yeah.
So they put the door that did not match in the more private space.
This opening was here in 1915, because Mac, again, going back, he says, standing at the rear room on the right. He's looking through that doorway, but that is not a first period. What period? Fairly early on in the time. There a major repair campaign and upgrade happened to this house, either at one time or maybe in a couple of phases. There was a major, obviously, exterior restoration that was done, and we think it coincides with an interior addition of the chimney on the back. There, in the early 19th century, somebody spent a lot of time and money on this house, and it became what you've been seeing and what you see now, on the interior and exterior. But as Wade said, the clear indication these posts are small, so typically what you'll have are larger load-bearing posts on each side of a door and a window. It's pretty consistent in this house. I'm not gonna say anything about this house is academically correct from a timber frame standpoint. It's kind of crazy, but clearly this door has been modified and put into this place. But as Wade said, it just makes sense. If you're gonna put a doorway into a hall, it was a very public space, and you do not have a door to match all the rest, and then you're in the cupola house, why not take the door off the secondary space and move it, and then build a new door for that? But then there's this question about Mac Chapel saying, well, they're 6-panel and all that. So how do you decide? How do you figure it out? How do you know where exactly that door came from? And that's where Susan comes back. We call Susan again. This is why we haven't put the final stamps on Susan's analysis, because we keep going back and saying, hey, can you check this? There's a really, really interesting note in her analysis. She catches this anomaly when she's checking the doors in the hall, and she does her sampling at the warehouse of the original woodwork, and this door that is in this location, she puts basically an asterisk and says, not sure why, but there's tan, and maybe it's just a primer, I don't know. But none of the rest of the woodwork on the hall has tan. None of it has cream. It's all shellac and then red brown and then on and on and on. This door is a bit different. So she just notes an anomaly. She didn't try to explain it. She doesn't know. So we went back and Wade's digging through the report, and he says, she calls it out, it's tan, it's right here. Because we were wondering, does that door have cream? She did sample it. And sure enough, the show side of it has cream. If you think back to Susan's analysis, the parlor room and the room at the back, where the door location was, we discovered is there, they have the same color, which is a cream, sort of off-white cream color. And that is what is on this door. It would not have been in the hall to receive that paint color. But it's there. It was there throughout Brooklyn's life. And so where did it get flip-flopped? We don't really know, but all we know is that we know where it goes now. So we can say that confidently that door is the door. So now we have the door. So
And it also makes the first pantry, the larger pantry division, start making more sense. Because when we found, of course, there's the 2 doors on both sides of the cupboard going into the separate pantries. You have the door coming in from the hall that we just discovered is not original. And then the door we found in the partition wall. So that 96-inch room had 3 doors in it until last week when we found out one of the doors was not first period.
what Wade is describing is there are 2 doors here. This is the cupboard. Looking at so what you're seeing is a little zoomed in sort of excerpt of the Habs floor plan again, 1930s. It says partition wall removed. In the library period, that was just one big room. Don Jordan said he remembers looking at books standing at that window right there. That's in the kitchen now. He said, I remember walking up, holding in the light. Well, the red indicates the partition wall that we found. Yellow indicates the door. That's a little unknown right now, which end of the partition. We'll just say it's in the middle for the sake of discussion for right now. That's a big question mark. But nonetheless, there's a door in that partition that connects these 2. And then this green is the door that Wade's been describing. So in the first period, this green was not here, but the red and yellow were. And then you had the 2 flanking doors that I did not indicate in the drawing. But what you would have effectively is a loop. You could walk into the dining room, you could go into the right butler's pantry, go through the partition wall door and stand in the back other side of the cupboard. You could flow from here to there to there and go around. But you couldn't go in the hall unless you went back out to the dining room. Those are Corbin's doors. That's what Corbin would have seen when he would have walked through. We can say, because of Corbin's death date, I can confidently say that we don't think Corbin ever walked through that green door. It wasn't there. he might be able to walk through it now, but he did not have it. So this would look very different, but it would make sense. Things start to make sense. When you go back to the original floor plan, things tend to make I say make more sense. It made sense to them anyway. We have about, what do we have, 4 pieces of this, Wade?
Yeah.
We have 4 pieces of the partition wall.
It's maybe 10% of the wall.
We have enough to know. We have enough to know based on the door evidence which way it faced, and the lack of hardware, which way the hinges would have been. We can put that wall back together on paper exactly effectively where it was. The only thing we don't know now is where the door is positioned.
And we might find that on the floor.
We're not done yet.
Yeah.
We're not done. But this is Brooklyn's interpretation. Did they see that on that partition wall? Were they the shelves? I don't know. I have to say probably not. It doesn't line up with the shelving spaces that we do in your house. Any questions about Corbin's doors? If you do, please email me, because we'll add them to our list. Yes, ma'am.
If you look at the pre-production barrel back,
Mhm.
there's a very narrow thing that is a hinge. A lot of old houses had a lot of servants. You go in one door, you have your room, you go out the other door, and then you aren't bumping into people all the time. My theory was if the original barrel back had a hinge there, they also loaded the food in from the back, and then they would open and show the presentation of all the food in there.
The original barrel back has it's fixed back, and it was, it would have been for China, it has plate rails, so it would have been simply for the display of China and the nice stuff. That's right.
I do have.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I'm assuming there was an outdoor kitchen.
Certainly.
So, for food service, when you are doing a dinner in the dining room, how did they get in to put the food in the butler's pantry? Cause that's.
The back door.
Through the back door?
The only door
And they
opening we
would have
know
to
of
go
right
in
now
the
is the
dining
one you
room and come
have.
back?
The only door opening we know of right now is the back door. What we don't know exactly is how was room 103, this back west room, what was it used for? How did it serve when needed? You gotta remember something about Robert's that case expert, the subject matter expert on the room usage, but I'll say this, because that's not the topic of the discussion, but I will say this. You could move it around and you could do what you needed to do in the rooms when you needed. They had an assignment, but they were also very fluid. Our rooms in our houses are oftentimes like that now. So, like I said, there are a lot of, all we're doing is presenting what we know today. Come back next time, we might say, hey, look at this door, it might be Corbin's other doors, I don't know.
I think
More of Corbin's doors.
Yeah, I think it'll be very nice when we get the final report from the ground penetrating radar, and we'll hopefully have a much better sense of the location and size of the original kitchen building and its spatial relationship to the main house. Based on everything we think we know, assume we know, it would have been, as you go out the back door, it would have been on the left-hand side of the lot. But I think the ability to get the ground penetrating radar and understand what is knowable with below ground evidence about the original kitchen building and match that to our expanding understanding of the main house and how it originally flowed and functioned, we'll be able to put those two things together and have a much better picture of what life there in the 18th century was really all about.
And I think, don't forget, there are 2 other levels to this house. It's not a single floor house. What did they do? How did they function? What did their function need to be that day? Those are massive questions that oftentimes you never get certain answers to. You can speculate based off of a lot of things, but right now, like I said, our job today is just present the evidence that we're finding. And we're certain to see other things. There are still some walls that we have not uncovered yet in the bathroom. You know, we obviously want to confirm, has that window always been a window? It's been a question. We asked the same question. Was there a door into the large or butler's pantry? Well, you know, yeah, I can't tell you what's below that window right now. Sheetrock, it's drywall, or some plaster or whatever it is. But this door not being here does make you wonder, did that have an exterior door? There's no evidence to
But it is
support it now,
important,
but
but it is important to know that based on everything we know now, the kitchen was on the other side of the lot, not
Right.
that side of the
the
lot.
kitchen would have been back here.
So-
What we do know from the map.
So therefore, if there was gonna be a service door, it would have most likely been on that side of the house, not the opposite side.
And
If there was one.
And there is not, I don't have what I need, but there are, in this room behind it, there are 2 windows that have always been windows. The down braces actually passed down below them, so they were always windows. So, yes ma'am?
Andrew, I don't wanna start a rumor, but
Not Eatonton, you don't.
But you could.
But
It happens a
is
lot.
there any way that, like at Hayes, there could have been food coming through the window?
That is a rumor. Don't start that rumor.
No,
Don't
I
start
mean,
that
I-
rumor. I fought that rumor at Hope Plantation this year.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, but it was on the second story, so. Yeah. I would say this, it's way more likely in this scenario, if you wanted to go that route and talk about that, because these windows are this high. You didn't just,
At Hayes too.
they're like this high. Yeah, yeah. That's built up, by the way. That's a much higher, there's cisterns there, so, you have doors. They use doors.
Yeah.
There is no written record that I know of that describes a firsthand account of that. Did they, on a good day when it was open or something? I don't know.
I mean, there's always been that talk in the American Historic House world about the whistling walk and blah, blah, blah. I think it's better to step away from that and look at function and relationship between free and enslaved in a property in a bigger, more encompassing way than just pulling it down to that little detail.
So,
You'll find another door.
no room. Oh, yeah, yes, ma'am.
Did you say that the back left room did or did not have a fireplace originally?
There's every indication right now that it did not. The chimney you see is a 19th century chimney, the mantelpiece. Couldn't be before about 1820 or so, according to Susan's paint analysis. The earliest coat of paint on that mantle and the coinciding woodwork, there are bits of that are earlier, but the earliest that mantle could be is based on chrome yellow, which wasn't even invented until about 1810 or 1815, and then not even in use architecturally until about 1820. So no earlier than, say, 1815 if you really wanted to push back.
Which is about the time that the Bonds are living there with a lot of children.
Yes, and that's a really good point. So you gotta remember, Corbin has no children, and Dr. Dickinson dies in 1802 or 3, so he can't be the guy that puts the chimney on if the paint says it can't be that early. So Bond ends up with about 13 head in the house, is that right, after it's all said and done?
1830 census, there are 13 free white people in it.
Yeah, so in 1830 census, there are 13 free white people living in that house. The chimneys obviously would have served for warming bedrooms, things.
His wife, his name won't come out of my mind. No, not Southern.
Opal. Opal.
Okay.
Yeah.
She was a docent. A lady came, a very old lady came, and she was there with her mother before, it became, while it was still a house that everybody came and stayed in. And she said that they did they did meals and shifts, and she was in a bed in the dining room. That was where most of the beds were. They took dinner in the study, not the study, in the living room, went in turns, and I've always been told that chimney was, the one in the back bedroom was added much later.
It certainly is, architecturally and from a masonry standpoint, the rear chimney is, certainly, that chimney that you see is early 19th century, maybe even into the second quarter, pushing the second quarter of the 19th century. Was there an earlier chimney there? There's no evidence of it. The evidence supports that it actually did not have a chimney, that the firebox or the hearth supports are added. And if there was an early chimney that was replaced, you would see architectural elements that supported the fact that there was a previous chimney. But the fact they had to add them in after the fact tells us they're not. Yes.
See, Andrew, you and Wade are digging back through the history of the house. At what point will you do the reconstruction? Are you gonna take it back to the original, or a modified version, like you indicated, the extra fireplace, that wasn't original? Okay, so will you be taking it back to the point where the museum took the molding out of it, or will you be taking it back prior to that?
That's
Because like
actually,
this doorway here that you were talking about.
when this process has played out, when all the evidence is on the table, we will, along with a lot of experts, subject matter experts, we've got a couple in the room with us, make what we would recommend available to the Coupal House as a recommendation. We would say, hey, it just depends on what you want to do with it in the future. There are a lot of options. We couldn't make that recommendation today because we don't see anything. I wouldn't even dare. This is just providing information. I can tell you that some things were and some things weren't. Wade and I can walk you through the house and show you the things we see. But what you should change is a different discussion. And I don't think it's a blanket. You have to take everything case in point, just as if every house is not the same. I think the fact that you have the 18th century the best colonial interior in the state of North Carolina, the best colonial house in the state of North Carolina. Some of us say the South, but somebody in the room might disagree with it. Ralph. I think that you gotta start there. I'll just leave it there. Yes, sir.
We get the original flooring full.
So, actually, that's a really cool discussion. It's not a part of it, but I can briefly talk about it because I think we got 10 minutes. This house has one example of every, am I wrong in saying, every known type of joinery and floors that was common. It has. This floor you're looking at right here has dowels that are horizontal, so it's doweled, it's butt joined and doweled, which is the most expensive floor. There's a few examples in Williamsburg and throughout Virginia, although it expands from there. And then on the second floor, they're splined, so they're butt joined and they have a floating spline. And then on the third floor, you have just butt join, no joinery, just butt join. And then in the shed rooms back here, we call these the shed rooms. They're not really shed rooms, but the secondary, the second pile rooms, they have tonguing roof. So you have all four types of floor joinery you could expect to ask for in the 18th century.
Ralph, is this the only 18th century house in the South with every example of floor joinery?
It's the only example in North Carolina.
Yes, that answers it.
Is there any evidence of
So there is, yes, the threshold is actually slightly different. We're not quite there yet because we haven't uncovered all the way, but Wade noted that threshold is not inlet into the floor, it actually sits on top of the floor, indication yes. So oftentimes what we'll see are ghost marks, and we were a little, we're not gonna say it yet, disappointed, but we were a little taken back that the kitchen floors have had a couple of generations of repairs and may ultimately be all replaced, but we don't know that yet. They're old underneath, but we don't think they're first period, but we can't see them all yet, so I don't know. They're very well, we've been hoping, our fingers are crossed that there's a bit of a ghost mark on those floors, but so far we haven't seen it yet. But it could be.
You mentioned that partition wall, that was
That's what it is.
plank wall.
It was a plank wall, and it would have had a cleat at the bottom that would have had to nail to, correct?
Sometimes they nail to the joist up above as
And
well for the support instead of a.
That's
a
exactly.
horizontal timber like we should with mortise, so that was odd to see that.
Well, this ran
That
across.
joist, base of that joist is bright and plain.
Yeah,
With
but the problem with it was a plaster ceiling.
plaster ceiling.
And the top of the dome of the cover was plaster, but this runs, and we don't have a photograph of it, this runs, imagine I'm standing looking at it, it runs over here to the back, and there's a coinciding ghost mark there, so that's your header. Indicates that it might be an afterthought, but it's early, yeah. Yes, sir?
I'm wondering if you might have found any sign of old fire damage.
Yeah.
The reason for my question, in January 1799, a slave named Bet, belonging to Dr. Dickinson, was tried for attempted arson of her master's house.
Well, we know which mantle he might have set on fire, because it's scorched pretty bad.
She was found not guilty.
Yeah, there's a.
What was the date on that?
99.
January 1799 was the trial.
So that was Dickinson.
Yeah, she belonged to Dr. Dickinson.
Well, there's
There's significant fire damage on one of the if you're looking at the original dining room mantle.
Keep talking, I don't.
The left side has been charred to the point that Brooklyn replaced a large panel just to the left of it.
This fireplace here, I believe that's what that's in, yeah, there's your
Yeah.
partition wall. Right about here, there's a
That's the window.
substantial amount of fire
That's a
damage.
window.
Oh, sorry, firebox here, yeah, sorry, down in here, right, there's the edge of the firebox or the hearth, opening here, and the panel that runs from this window to here is scorched pretty bad. In fact, it was bad enough that Brooklyn replaced it. But there's a lot of, yes, there's a lot of fire damage. But you would, if you're gonna see fire damage in that room, you would expect it to creep up behind that mantle. So, yeah. But there hasn't been any, other than that though, there is not in the first floor.
But the northeast corner of the kitchen, today's kitchen, looked like there'd been a fire there as well.
That black that you see along the header in that room and in a couple other places is actually a painted on, there's a lot of bug damage in that house early on. All the corner posts so far, we haven't seen the south, east corner posts, right?
It's
It's new
I
too.
saw
So
it today.
all 4 corner posts of the first floor are replaced of the exterior, all of them. And they did protrude into the room. And then the black, going back to what you said, they painted some sort of black. It's not tar, it's a chemical, you can kind of smell it. It must be a bug retardant.
Like a
or something.
creosote or something.
Well, it doesn't have that smell, but it's something they brushed on. You can see where they chopped away some of the termite damage and then brushed on something pretty potent. Yeah, but it is black. Yes, that kind of caught our attention at first, but it is not chalk. Ralph?
Well, you know, one thing I noticed that we don't really see in Virginia are these 2 back rooms with no fireplaces. And is that something you see like on your coastal cottages maybe, or?
Yeah.
Because it seems so odd when we're looking at it, but maybe it's not so odd down here.
The first one that comes to mind, it's a kind of a comparison in the timeline, general timeline. Richard Parsons, a mentor of mine, lives in Newburgh in a 1771 gambrel roof. The gambrel, in that house has no rear chimney. It's a 2-pile, no rear chimney. So yes, you do see it. How often is a question. How many of them added like this one? So, yeah.
But the house had many different uses. I mean, it started out as a building, an official building, because of Lord Granville. And then it became a house that the Dickinsons lived in, but he had his office into that. And then it became, when all the sisters were gone, then, she had to turn it into a, stay at night.
Well, I think that one of the things we're gonna understand is that as more information comes out, we'll probably have a better understanding, but we'll never know exactly how they used every room, whatever they needed to be. But the one thing you have to say is that there's not an inventory for this house, but there is an estate sale record, and it does list 2 beds.
But
I would say.
in the inventory list, it says where everything is.
No, it does not. It does not give us an indication of where. It's a running list of things. It's not a true inventory. It's literally just an estate sale. Yes, ma'am. It doesn't divide by rooms. It simply goes down the list. It doesn't. You can see where stuff starts and stops, but you don't know what exactly.
There are logical room groupings.
Yeah, there's groupings.
In the list.
It's clustered together, correct. You have pewter and you have a lot of china, and then you have a lot, then all of a sudden you have a bedstead washstand type thing, so you can say, okay, I'm in a bed chamber now. But what it doesn't tell you is that in the dining room, we sold X, Y, Z, in the hall, we sold, all these things. It is simply a running law. Yes, sir.
When Corbin was using the house, William Churton had his drawing office somewhere in it,
Well, that would make sense.
and he used that for drawing plats and working on his intended map of North Carolina, which came out under Mouzon's name in 1770.
I don't have a photograph of it, but.
It would have needed to be a room with good internal lighting.
Speaking of maps,
So
yeah.
we were looking at framing numbers on the 3rd floor, and Don and Andrew were in one of the closets up in the attic of the third floor. Two people, it was a crowd. I was checking out another one to kind of get ahead of that. Looked under the floorboard, saw a piece of fabric, pulled it out, and I think Vonna came in that day. And it was a section, very small section of one of the Price Strother map.
The Price Strother map.
Yeah.
Laid on linen. It's the, it shows the Cape and Cape Fear of North Carolina and the point. It has the A for Atlantic with some of the numbers, and you can overlay it over. I don't know which version, but it is a very small fragment of a Price Strother map.
There's only 16 of those now, and maybe 116.
16 and 132nd.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And it's a museum, so that people were always donating things to the museum, so there's all sorts of
Certainly.
stuff.
It's hard to say, yeah. When you find it in situ, you can only say that's where you found it. Yeah.
It was in a rat's nest.
It was in a rat's nest up in the top of that. It had been there once. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up, but thank y'all for coming. Thank you for your interest and your support in the project, and just stay tuned, and as we progress, I'll just give you the timeline. We're looking to wrap up the deinstallation or the removal right on time. By June 1st, we'll have all the 20th century woodwork out. And we did find some 1920s stuff. There's a reference in 1919, 1920 about being done, as I mentioned. So we have found a bit of that, which was fun. And then as we move forward, we'll finish this and then jump into evaluating structural needs. I'll leave it at that. There are some.
I'd just like to point out two esteemed guests here, Ralph Corbin and his mate Clifford. If you'd
Wonderful
stand
wife.
up. They were in Brooklyn and heading all of the beginning of this up to, take the woodwork out and everything. So, and they also housed Andrew and Wade while they were up there,
Very nice.
looking over some of the extraction of
Which was the
the
worst
woodwork.
part.
And so
It
they've
was
been
awful.
very much
Thank
involved,
you.
passionate about this. So thank you for your passion and thank you for your support.
It's been a drive, it really made me being in New York easy. So if you can do that, it was nice. They held my hand the whole time and said, go here and go there, and don't get lost there. And they really did make it nice. So yes, thank you for your hospitality, and thank you for saving the project a bunch of money on housing and everything, even subway tickets and stuff. So, yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
The library closes at 7, so